Where you're at right now, if I think we have a great buying opportunity, and if you're in a metro where things are 25% off of their high water mark, um, it might be worth getting a little aggressive on numbers.
Welcome to The Real Deal, a commercial real estate investing podcast. I'm your host, Aman Shahi. There's a ton going on in the world right now, and much of it impacts real estate investors. The Real Deal podcast will take a look at what's happening and how it influences you as a real estate investor. Each episode is a 20-minute segment dedicated to distilling the day's most important news, so you can stay up to date on what's going on in the world and how it might affect the commercial real estate market.
Welcome back to another episode of the Cashflow Capitalist Show. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Brian Briscoe. Hey Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I very much appreciate it.
So tell us about yourself. Give us your 30-second introduction. Tell us who you are.
Yeah, 30-second introduction. Born and raised in Salt Lake. 5 kids. Been married for 25 years. Spent 20 years in the military. Retired
Thanks for
2
service.
years ago. Thanks, man. And apartment investing was my exit plan from the military. So I started 2 to 3 years before I hit my 20-year mark and was eligible for retirement. And since then, I co-founded a company that I left, and then co-founded a second company. But since then, I've been involved in about 1,600 total units, and that's where I'm at right now.
Nice. So how did you even get to real estate when you came from military, have no idea what you want to do, how things are going to be? What was the first step?
Yeah. So first step was trying to figure out, one thing I learned early on in the military is you move every 2 to 3 years, right? And so the traditional way of gaining wealth, I'd read books like, The Millionaire Next Door and whatnot. And the conventional wisdom is you have to buy a house. You buy a house and your equity increases over the years. And I realized if I'm moving every 2 to 3 years, you know, that's not always time to make up, all the extra fees you have to pay to buy the house. So I started really thinking about, okay, how can I still build equity? And there's a lot of people in the military that have a kind of a buy and hold mindset, or a let's buy a place, and then when we move out 2 years later, we'll turn it into a rental. And so I started exploring that option, and in 20 years, we were successful at doing that 3 times. Buying properties with the intent to rent them out after we moved, and that's what got me started in real estate. It was there was enough there that I started realizing that there was a lot of benefit, a lot of potential, and from there it just snowballed. Intentionally snowballed.
And how did you even come across apartment investing? How, multifamily? How did you even come across that? Because traditional real estate investing, everybody thinks is buying a house, put in a rental.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I had done, and I was trying to scale that model. And I was still active duty. I was deployed, and just for the record, my experience with deployments, either have so much to do that you don't have a free minute, or you have so little to do that you're completely bored. It's one or the other extremes, it seems. But in 2017, I was on a deployment where I had about 3 hours of work to do every day. I had one of those roles, one of those jobs that was like a break glass in case of emergency. And so, being where we were, I didn't have access to Wi-Fi or internet, but maybe once a month, I'd go somewhere where I had Wi-Fi. And every time I knew I was getting Wi-Fi, I would download as many books on real estate as I could, and I mean, I would just do a search on Amazon, real estate investing, and I would buy every book that was $5 or less, and then I would pick 1 or 2 books that were, the regular book price, $15, $20, $30 or whatever. And then in the one in the month between, downloading all those books and the next time I'd have access to Wi-Fi, just go through and read what was on my Kindle at the time. Yeah, but how did I get into apartments? Well, the answer to that is I accidentally downloaded a book on apartments. It must have been like $2 on Amazon, and I downloaded a book on apartments. And I remember, when I was sifting through the books after, figuring out what to read next. I'm like, I downloaded a book on apartments. I'm like, I'm not going to do apartments. And then I got, 2, 3 weeks later, I read through all the other books, and I'm just like, okay, what's next to read? I'm like, the only one I haven't read is that one on apartments. And honestly, it was a very fortuitous mistake because, that book really got me thinking about buying apartments. And lo and behold, that's what I'm doing now.
Many people still think buying apartment is something out of their reach. How how was your mindset when you have the book in front of you? Do I want to read it or not? Because this is something I don't know if I can do it. How did you like tackle with the mindset at that time?
Well, that was exactly my mindset, and that was exactly why I was reluctant to read that book. It was um, apartments are not accessible to me, and that book helped apartments become accessible for me, if that makes sense. It was by Brandon Turner, and I've since talked to him, and I told him that story, and his response wasn't what I was looking for. He's like, "I'm sorry you had to read that." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "That's a terrible book." I'm like, okay, you're right. It probably wasn't very well written, but it unlocked something in my brain. It made apartments accessible to me. And so from there on out, it was just a matter of, okay, how? How do I do this? Instead of, and this was the progression from, doing something that I knew, which was single family houses, to figuring out how to do something, a little bit bigger.
Yeah. And as we know, like in syndication, there are like multiple roles: capital raising, asset management, underwriting, finding the deals, and acquisition. What is your main superpower that you wanted to more focus on? That yeah, this is something I can do.
Up front, I've got 2 degrees in math, and up front, I was more focused on the um, what do you call it? The underwriting and acquisitions. I figured I could underwrite. I can figure out how to work spreadsheets. I know formulas and everything else. And I was very analytical. So that's what really got me started. But I think when we look at how things progressed, I was working at the Pentagon at the time, and at the Pentagon, I would take my phone, stick it in a lockbox for the regular business hours, and I wouldn't be able to touch it again until later. I wouldn't be able to access my regular Gmail account or anything else while I was in the office. And so the way that progressed is I had a couple of partners, and they basically fired me from being the acquisitions guy. And they essentially said, "Hey, look, I mean, the honest, I mean, I found the first three, and I made it work." And basically, what they said was, "Hey, look, you're not available. We need the acquisitions guy to be flexible." There was another guy on our team that had a similar skill set, and he had a job that was a lot more flexible. So, he ended up being the acquisitions guy, and I moved into a capital raising role where really what I would do well was produce content. I would LinkedIn content, video content, you name it. I was producing content, and that was bringing in. It was getting us a lot of recognition. A lot of people were seeing us. A lot of people were hearing us, and eventually, started bringing in a lot of money. And so, I left that partnership in 22 about a year and a half ago, and started my new thing. And right now, what we're looking at is, focusing on one metro, and the metro Salt Lake City, and starting to build up there. So, I would say my superpower is probably bringing people together, and still really like. creating content.
So you mentioned Salt Lake City. I also read maybe like a couple of months ago, there's so many big private equity companies are also targeting Salt Lake City.
Mhm.
What kind of challenges are you getting in finding the deals and bringing people together in Salt Lake City?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of private equity firms targeting Salt Lake City. I mean, when you get above a certain purchase price, it's large money, and it's a much smaller purchase price than you're seeing in other places, you know. So, um, yeah, I mean, I saw a $20 million deal get picked up by a hedge fund, and a lot of hedge funds won't touch deals that are that size. So, I think Salt Lake is a city. It historically has been very conservative on a lot of things, as far as growth and everything else. And so we were talking before the show. I think the average. It's not uncommon to meet somebody that has 8 kids in Salt Lake City, and so there's a lot of future growth happening in Salt Lake City. When you look at the population tree, which shows what ages people are, you have a really large percentage of younger people. So, I mean, just a lot of good things happening in Salt Lake City, and yeah, a lot of private equity has figured that out, and a lot of private equity is jumping into it. Saw a recent article that the California Pension Teachers CalPERS. I don't remember what the acronym is, but it's the California Pension System. They bought a large apartment complex in Salt Lake, and so if they're buying stuff in Salt Lake, I'd hate to. I'd have to say there's something good about Salt Lake, but I do like it for lots of reasons.
Even they're not buying in California.
Yeah, I mean, they're not buying in California, Yeah, California, when you look at the landlord-tenant laws, it's kinda crazy to be a landlord there. Utah is the opposite. Actually, I didn't know this until just recently, but, this was me helping my daughter out with her lease. She had a property manager enter her apartment without permission, while she wasn't home. And it turns out that that's actually legal in Salt Lake. I mean, the landlord tenant rules are so landlord friendly. Um, and I actually looked up the law, and what the law said is, landlords should provide previous notice. 24 hours is generally deemed sufficient. Um, but there was a caveat. It says, unless otherwise stated in the lease. And I went to her lease, and the lease that she signed said that the landlord can enter at any time, which is so that's how friendly it is. Being a tenant there, I wouldn't want that in my lease, but super landlord friendly. Yeah, and so there's lots of good things about Salt Lake. The growth is off the charts. Both population growth and economic growth. I think those are the two biggest indicators. And then it is a red state and very landlord friendly.
Yeah. Don't you think is that's some sort of invasion of privacy? Some property manager can just come at any time.
It's not a good way to keep tenants. This particular case, it was a mom and pop. It was just some random guy that bought a fourplex. He was not a professional manager. He stopped by the property just to check up on it, and um, I've talked with him several times over just different stuff, and he's a first time property manager. So I would not recommend it. I would definitely not recommend going to your tenant's place and just walking in whenever you want. But and then my daughter was not super happy when she found out either. But anyway, that's just kind of an illustration of how landlord friendly the state is.
Nice. And if you're connecting the investors to invest in Salt Lake City, do you get the investor like all over the place, or are you targeting mostly who lives in Salt Lake City? Because I also know that there's so many big private equity companies who have their family offices there where they're getting the capital from, also in the Salt Lake City.
It's Salt Lake City is still a lot of people view Salt Lake as a small city still, and a lot of people just don't know about it. So one of the issues we're having is when you look at a lot of the multifamily reports over the last couple of years, they've all said Sun Belt, Sun Belt, Sun Belt, Sun Belt, right? And so a lot of people are familiar with investing in Phoenix and Dallas and Houston and Atlanta and the other Sun Belt markets that we do have a hard time competing with dollars outside of the state. And most of the time, it's an education issue. Most of the time, it's I've seen you, hey, Brian, I've seen you post a lot about Salt Lake City, but I'm not comfortable enough yet investing there. If you had a deal in Houston or Dallas or Atlanta right now, I'd invest. And so for people outside of Salt Lake, I think you have to sell an investor on you as a deal sponsor first, and then the metro. That's how I think it works, And I think I've done a fairly good job at selling myself as being a responsible sponsor. But yeah, the next step, and this is something I was talking to my one of my teammates about this morning, is we need to put more educational material out there about Salt Lake City. So to go back to your question, we are focusing on getting investors from Salt Lake City. That is 100% our focus. But we do take investors from everywhere. When I use LinkedIn a lot for marketing. We do have some other marketing campaigns that are specific to Salt Lake City. But when I blast things out on LinkedIn, it doesn't target specifically the Salt Lake City crowd. So I do have a lot of investors. I think the last deal we had investors from 25 different states. We just filed our blue sky stuff, and I think 25 was the number. So about half the country.
Yeah, there are so many new laws by SEC every day coming out. And how do you build the relationships with investor, and how do you strengthen them that they come and listen to you, follow you, invest with you?
Consistency is the answer. I got a text from somebody this morning, and I've known him for several years. And when I say several, over 20 is the answer. We were neighbors when I was stationed in Okinawa, and that was 2023. So I've known him for 20 years now. And the text goes like this: "Hey, Brian, I've been following you for a long time, and I'm finally ready to invest in apartments." All right. Now he was a military buddy of mine. We were stationed together in Okinawa. We were stationed together a couple of years later in North Carolina, and our paths have crossed, many times over the last, 20 years. And a lot of it is just drips. A lot of drops in the bucket at times. Now there are other cases, where you meet people for the first time on LinkedIn, and 90% of my marketing right now is on LinkedIn, and we're trying to change the number, so we're doing other marketing activities. But when that constant putting content out, whether it's the podcast, whether it's our YouTube channel, whether it's what I'm posting on LinkedIn, people start following you, and they start seeing you over and over again. So really the relationships, for me, starts with the marketing. You market enough, and people see you, they get familiar with you, they start warming up to you. And now when they're ready to invest, they start reaching out to the people that are the household names. And another really stupid example, I drink Monster Energy drinks because I've been drinking them for a long time. There's probably 40 different drinks out there that are much better, but I know what I'm getting here. But
It's a lot of
anyway,
caffeine.
yeah, it is a lot of caffeine. Yeah.
I don't want to tell you on the podcast. I would be like, I drink a lot of caffeine in the morning before going to gym, and I know that what you're talking about. So, and if you talk about nowadays, it's very hard to find the deals properly because of the way economy is going, high interest rate. What are your opinions on that?
Well, with the high interest rates, I think there's a lot of sellers that don't have to sell right now, and I think that's why it's really hard to find deals. Is you have two types of sellers. You have sellers right now that have to sell. And when I say have to sell, they're usually like in some sort of interest rate crunch, where either their loan's coming due or their interest rates adjusting or something like that. And those are the ones that have to sell. And that's usually where you're going to be able to connect. And then you have a lot of apartment investors that are just, they have a number in mind. And if you don't hit their number, they're not going to sell. And so those are the ones where, I mean, we've seen same properties, when we're talking with brokers, we keep a list of all the properties we underwrite. And, we had an offer out last week where we found out that we did not get the offer accepted. And so we went back to our drawing board. And the first thing we do is we look at our list of properties that we've underwritten and, okay, what other ones did we like? And we would go back out to brokers. And one thing that I've seen in Salt Lake over the last year is a lot of the things in our buy box just haven't moved. It's like, so we're asking the brokers, hey, is that still available? It's like, yep, still available, hasn't sold yet. And so what's happening is the sellers that don't have to sell are able to be patient. They're able to wait and get their price. And if they're cash flowing and able to pay all the bills, there's no reason for them to sell right now. So um, really to be able to make things work, you have to find either a seller that's a little bit more motivated to sell, or you have to get a little more aggressive with your numbers. And I think where we're at in the economy right now, depending on where you're at, multifamily prices have slid up to 30% over the last 2 years. Some areas are a lot less, but I think 30 is probably the most extreme. Where you're at right now, if I think we have a great buying opportunity, and if you're in a metro where things are 25% off of their high water mark, it might be worth getting a little aggressive on numbers.
So, what do you recommend in today's economy? Should some people focus on bridge debt or fixed debt?
The debt has to match the deal. All right. I don't think there's an easy answer for that one. Um, when you bring in bridge debt, you can get bridge debt with fixed interest rate, right? We've got a couple of bridge loans with fixed interest rates. It's usually from the smaller banks and credit unions, but we have had some bridge products with fixed interest rate. Really, I think the answer comes down to the loan has to match your business plan and afford you some flexibility on the exit, right? If you get a fixed rate loan right now, which most of your permanent debt is fixed rate, you know what you're getting. The downside to your fixed rate loans is they will typically come with a prepayment penalty. And that prepayment penalty can be pretty stiff, right? And so, I mean, but you know what you're getting. I mean, when you sign the papers, it's written in there. You're going to have X interest rate for this amount of time, and here is the prepayment, schedule. And so, when you're looking at the bridge products, which have variable interest rate, there's a lot more flexibility on the sales side. You don't have the prepayment penalties. So it's almost a pay me now or pay me later type. But yeah, with the bridge debt, they typically, the rate can vary. Your payment can go as high as, rates go. So there's a little bit more unknown there, but I think there's still a place for bridge debt, and I would prefer to have fixed rates, in most situations, but I think there's always a place for some bridge debt.
And Feds also have mentioned that next year they are going to slash the rate for like three times.
Mhm.
And expectations are by 2025, we're going to have a 4.7%.
Mhm.
So, what are your plans for 2024?
Plan for 2024 is the same as 2023. We're going to keep on underwriting deals, and where it makes sense, we're going to jump in. I think 2024, if rates come down, there's going to be more people on the buy side, and there's going to be more people on the sell side, right? So we're going to have to be a little bit more nimble with deals. right now in today's market, I've seen a couple of properties, and once again, our buy box, we have a very narrow buy box. We're talking, $5 to $15 million on deals right now. Um, but where our buy box is, most of the properties that we've seen haven't closed, right? And so we could take our time. We could wait 6 months, circle back, and say, "Hey, is that seller still wanting to sell?" What I see in the future is, yeah, as rates come down, buyers are going to be willing to pay more, which mean the sellers that were patient, it's going to be more likely that the buyers hit their numbers. And as soon as the buyers start hitting the seller numbers, we're going to see a lot more transaction volume, and things are just going to start speeding up. So, what I'm looking at is, in 2023, we did a lot of loan assumptions. I closed on 10 properties in 2023. Um, 3 of them had new debt, so 7 out of 10 were loan assumptions, right? And I think in 2024, we'll still get a loan assumption out there, but as time goes on, the loan assumptions are getting, less and less viable because more time has passed since people have locked in that 3 point something percent rate. So I think we'll be able to do better at hitting prices with new debt than existing debt. But yeah, I think the biggest thing for us specifically, and this is, not generalized to the whole United States. This is, Salt Lake City market, B-class value adds. We are going to have to be a little bit more nimble. We're going to have to be faster getting our offers in, and faster getting everything wrapped up and closed.
If somebody wants to get into real estate in today's market, which is like really, really confusing for many people, and what advice do you want to give to somebody, that person who wants to get into real estate?
Yeah. So I would say understand why. What are your goals? Okay, and not your real estate goals. What are your financial goals? Why do you want to get into real estate? And I think if you can clearly define what you're trying to achieve out of real estate, it's a lot easier to chart a path. If your goal is to just get into real estate, I think that's the wrong way of approaching it. So I would say figure out what you want to get out of real estate. And once you decide what you want to get out of real estate, now you've probably narrowed the field down from 1,000 different ways to invest to maybe 20 different ways to invest. So that's first, and then from there, I mean, it's a matter of time and money. Most people have one, but not the other. But depending on how much time you have as a resource and how much money you have as a resource, that could also make a couple different strategies stand out. So I syndicate. The more money you have, the easier it is to syndicate. But you don't need money; you do need time. So.
I want to make a comment. In the morning, around before going to gym, I was watching this video of Jim Rohn. He said there are like 4 questions you need to figure out to get the success. First is why you want to do this, why not. Third is why not you, and then why not now.
And why not now? Yep, I've heard that one before. Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah,
that's
why
really
not?
powerful.
Yeah, it is. I was I'm in a mastermind, and has a very coaching flair. And yesterday they were talking about setting goals, and the biggest contributor to whether somebody follows through with their goals is why. It's not the what. It's never the what. It's the why. So if you've got that solid why, you're going to be much more successful at achieving anything. Because the what, I mean, here's the reality. Anything that's worth doing is going to take a lot of time and effort. And if you don't have a really good why attached, when you start getting into that grind and that time and effort, it's going to be really easy to stop doing stuff. Really easy to say, man, this is hard. Why do you want to get into real estate? And I think if you can clearly define what you're trying to achieve out of real estate, it's a lot easier to chart a path. If your goal is to just get into real estate, I think that's the wrong wrong way of approaching it. So I would say figure out what you want to get out of real estate. And once you decide what you want to get out of real estate, you know, now you've probably narrowed the field down from 1,000 different ways to invest to maybe 20 different ways to invest. So that's first, and then from there, I mean, it's a matter of time and money. You're most people have one, but not the other. But depending on how much time you have as a resource and how much money you have as a resource, that could also make a couple different strategies stand out. So I syndicate. The more money you have, the easier it is to syndicate. But you don't need money; you do need
The
time.
same like why you want 10,000? Why not?
Yeah. Why not? Yeah. Why not? Yeah. I'm worthy of the 10,000, but yeah, why not? Why not me? And why not now? I can do it, and I can do it now, but yeah, you still need that engine, the fuel for that fire.
And before we wrap this up, I have two more questions. First one is, what is your morning routine as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, my morning routine, unfortunately, has kind of been in flux. You can't see it, but I got a big wall calendar to my right where I put X's on. I was doing Miracle Morning really, really well for amazingly starting in January last year. January, February, March, April, May, June, and then sometime in July, the X's just start disappearing, right? But that's something that right now, the week between Christmas and New Year's, I really sit down and try to figure out what my perfect day looks like. And I'm going to be retooling the morning routine a little bit. There are certain things about the morning, and Hal Elrod, great author. I love the Miracle Morning, but there are certain things in there that weren't, so miraculous for me. So I'll be retooling that one and starting it again. But it's going to look very similar to Miracle Morning, but it's going to be a Brian Briscoe version of it.
Nice. And if today is the last day on this planet, what's the one thing that you want to do?
Well, not be on a podcast.
Well, maybe what about tomorrow? It's Friday.
Yeah, tomorrow's Friday. Gosh, I mean, if today was my last day on my planet, I'd want to spend it with my wife and kids. Is all. I don't really care what we're doing. Something that would be memorable is all. Not sitting on the couch with phones out. And I guess that tells me what we should be doing every day is not sitting on the couch with phones out.
Nice. And if somebody wants to reach out to you, where can they reach out to you?
LinkedIn is definitely the best place to do that. Just look me up on LinkedIn, and if we're connected, just reach out via messaging. If we're not connected, connect. And I'm usually pretty good at reaching out to people who connect with me, through LinkedIn as well.
And I'll make sure I put that on show notes. And thank you so much, Brian, for your time and for your wisdom. And I really appreciate that. And I'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on The Real Deal, a commercial real estate investing podcast, the show that covers everything to do with multifamily real estate investing to help you become an expert in your real estate ventures. We're here to help you create passive income and financial freedom so that you can achieve what you want whenever you want. We'll catch you next time on The Real Deal.